Okay, hello, and welcome to our April Extra Expert Q&A with Shaa'ista. Shaa'ista is friend of the fam, was our slow bar brew instructor, cafe leader, officially.
Yeah.
I think that's on LinkedIn. Um, at our first level up on our market pop-up day, and then just a couple weeks ago in San Diego, hosted a cupping for us about like cupping 101. And I'm gonna let her introduce herself more than that, but everybody please welcome Shaa'ista. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be here. And love everything that you all are doing. As a baby of Glitter Cat Barista, this makes my heart happy seeing that this program exists and all the resources that you all provide for people. It just makes me like very happy and more than happy to be part of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I will read this, and then our first question is going to lead right into sort of like your background, so maybe we can use it as a bridge. But she's a writer, and I'm trying to read the presentation mode. I guess. Sorry. You're a forever auntie and part-time dancing machine for over a decade. You've worked in specialty coffee, earning your Q and your CVA. You've worn every retail coffee hat imaginable and probably some other super cool hats because Shaa'ista has style. Proud to be a former competitor and current head judge, which I witnessed in person recently for the U.S. Brewers Cup champions, and is the owner-operator of Revel Cupping Room, an independent coffee mobile cupping lab. Thank you. So, Shaa'ista, how did you get all those accolades? How did that become your bio? How did you start off in coffee? Tell us everything.
Yeah, my coffee story, I think, is kind of unique in the way that I have worn a lot of hats in a lot of different, like, I've lived many lives. I used to be in theater. I used to work in theater. And I did an apprenticeship at a theater in Atlanta, where I'm from, and decided when I moved to New York, as you do, that I wanted to A, live abroad, and B, get a higher degree. And so I was like, okay, how can I do both of those things? And I got into a grad school program in London for play and screenwriting. So my first master's in play and screenwriting. And I wanted to work where I could do that anywhere. I'm like, if I'm traveling, I'm going to be in a different country. What can I do that I'll still be able to do there? And I'm over retail, right? And I was like, coffee. I love it. I drink it. It's a big part of like since memory for me and my family. So I should get into coffee. And it just so happened that I got a job in New York that translated to a job at a sister company in the UK. And that didn't end up working out, but I ended up living across the street from a very small cafe where my first instructor in like actual espresso extraction and, you know, caring about what you give to your customers was this Italian woman who basically beat it into me, the importance of espresso and dialing in, and you can't give someone something that you're not going to drink. And from that, I got a job where we were training with Origin in London. And my boss then was just so happened to be an Italian barista competitor. And she showed me that there are so many ways that you can be in coffee, and it doesn't have to be on bar. You can do so many other things, training and education and competition. So when I moved back to the US, thinking I would get back into theater, I was like, maybe I'll just stick with coffee. And I did. I got a job at Perk, which is based out of Savannah, that has 5 shops in Atlanta. And I did basically everything under the sun for them. I was a barista, I was a shift lead, I was a manager, I opened shops with them. And then I got into training with them. And then that's how I actually got into competition and Glitter Cat Barista. And from there, it kind of like skyrocketed my career. That's how competition is how I found out about NKG Pace, which is the coffee equity program. And that's how I got my Q through the Neumann Cafe group. And yeah, that kind of led me to where I am now and seeing on the green side how many roasters don't have the capability of cupping in their own spaces, and how many baristas want to learn or develop their palates but don't have access to those resources. And Rebel Cupping Room kind of came from wanting to marry those two things, providing a service to roasters so that they can have independent, they don't have to go to like their importers, they can cup anything they want. And then also doing education and like the palate development bit for like baristas or even consumers who want to develop those skills. Yeah.
Wonderful. What a journey. I love that you went across the pond and came back.
Yeah, around the world.
So you started it, but I would love for you to like zoom in on you said maybe Perk to Glittercat. Glittercat what gave you access to competitions, and it sounds like competitions is kind of where your pathway moved. But I think that, I mean, as someone who's worked in green and really worked hard to find my space in green coffee, but it is like this behind the scenes thing. It's not, you're not the competitor, right? You're not the one that's on a stage. You're in a warehouse and you're doing weird things. So like, how did you get to find yourself in the green space from when you were at Perk and learning about competitions?
Yeah, so at that time, Perk did a lot of like education as far as having like their importer partners come and give talks to the baristas. And so that was how I realized that, oh, you can buy coffee from multiple sources. You can buy different origins from different people. And I really thought that was interesting, like being a bridge between roasters and origin. And at the time, I hadn't been to origin yet, but I always knew that once I did, I had a feeling that would like level up or give me like the full picture of like this coffee game, right? So what happened was essentially I started developing my palate because I could tell that what I was tasting in coffee wasn't what we were cupping when we would cup with importers. And that was something that was important to me, right? As a person, like my personal growth and development, I need to develop my palate. Even as a coffee professional, I can't teach something to someone that I don't know. And so getting into management and training and realizing that I needed to like step up my game essentially if I was going to expect baristas to do something. I never expect someone to do something that I don't do myself, or I wouldn't ask someone to do something that I can't do myself. And so like over a year, I just really dove into, I had a trainer named Danny Boras. He's Colombian and he has a coffee company in Atlanta called Flow. And he would cup with me every time he came on bar. He was the trainer, one of the trainers at Perk. He was like, all right, we're going to taste this coffee from this roaster. Okay, we're going to taste this from Black and White. Okay, we're going to taste this from Say. Okay, we're going to taste this from Brandywine. And that helped me to like hone in on different roast profiles, different ways that people can roast the same coffee. It's not going to taste the same based on the roaster. And from there, I kind of got into, okay, this is something that I realized I had a kind of natural talent for, but I didn't know that until I started doing it, right? Sometimes you don't know you can do the thing until you're actually in the midst of doing it. And I was getting a lot of good feedback on my feedback, essentially. And from there and doing competition and talking to all these people who work in different facets of coffee, right? In competition, I think it really helps to open up your eyes to everything that's out there. You meet importers, you meet green buyers, you meet roasters, you meet cafe owners. Everyone is all in the same space. And especially when I got into judging, you see that everyone has a different like lived experience or different coffee experience that adds to your judging or your giving competitors like the best chance possible. And so for me, seeing all those people is like, okay, there's more than just retail. How do you get there? And that's kind of where I hit a wall, right? Because for me, I had gone as far as I could go at Perk. I was managing and set to open a shop with them. And there wasn't really anywhere else for me to go. And as a person who like stagnation is a big no for me, I have to constantly be feeling like I'm evolving or growing or learning. And because like I said, that's the only way I can give that to someone else, right? I realized, okay, I need to figure out what's next because I don't know where else I can go here. And I know that that can't be the end for me. And that's how I found out about NKG Pace, which is a coffee equity program, or was a coffee equity program for Black people in coffee. It's basically a year-long fellowship that gives you an entry-level position at a coffee importer. And you have, we were doing QC. So I applied twice actually. The first year I didn't get it. And I was like, all right, that's just a challenge for me to up my skills, right? So the next year I actually was one of the top 3 finalists, and you get placed at Atlas, which is in Seattle, or the 2 Inter-Americans. One is in San Diego, where I am now, or the Inter-American that's in New Jersey, which also has Rothfuss, which is more of a commercial versus specialty coffee importer. So I got it. I got San Diego, and that was like a whole mind-blowing seeing like the back end of the industry, because our positions were specifically for QC. We're coming in with the idea that you will get your Q at the end of this. And so it's a year-long, like kind of like boot camp, if you will, or like of learning everything about the green side. So I learned sales, I learned logistics, inbound and outbound. I learned how to release coffee, how to do contracts, and then QC, obviously, right? So that, to me, like, I have been developing my palate, but now I'm learning about processing. Now I'm learning about harvest. Now I'm learning about green grading, which are all things that on the retail side, you don't have access to unless you work in the roastery maybe, or close with the roaster. You don't have access to a lot of the green of the coffee that you're going to be selling or giving to your customers. And so that was kind of how I got into green, working in QC. And then I realized from there that I kind of wanted more of a hands-on experience with roasters and origin. After we did go to origin, which was to Costa Rica, and I was like, oh my God, it's really like I want more people. We have to find a way for more people to have the experience of going to origin, especially baristas, because it makes such a huge difference in understanding the work that producers do for this agricultural product that is entire livelihoods for a lot of the population. But also seeing like that work tells you the story of what is in your cup when you're finally tasting it. And so that for me was like, okay, well, I want to help more producers get to the right baristas, the right roasters, the right shops. So how do I do that? And that felt like getting into sales. But the QC part to me is something that you can't have one without the other. Quality and like working with green has to be there in order to tell that story to roasters. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So you've kind of answered a lot of this, but does this like jostle anything else that you'd like to add to like the narrative that we're building about like what has changed in your career? Maybe even like how you perceive things, like you were just talking about when you learn more about the processing, learn more about sensory evaluation and like your perspective there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think accessibility is a huge thing that I think people don't think about when they say that they only like washed coffees or whatever they like, or they don't like co-ferments. Working on the green side and seeing like quality has taught me a lot about washed coffees are only accessible or feasible if you have access to water, which every producing country doesn't have ample access to water. So that's something to think about, right? And then co-ferments, for example, people are like, oh, no to co-ferments. But if you think about coffee as the agricultural product that it is, and if a producer has sent their coffee to an importer, a coffee that's usually an 85 score, and the importer is like, I don't know about this year, seems like it's 82, maybe it's 80, that producer still has to sell that coffee. That coffee is their livelihood. So a way for them to do that is to do a co-ferment. You up the value of the coffee, you still get paid. And so I think that things like that are things that being on the green side of things and learning about processing and what resources a producer needs in order to effectively do them. Shade drying is a huge thing if you don't have ample sunlight, right? Or if you have like too much rain or too much water, then that can affect how you're doing things. Like it's the difference between Vietnam and Thailand when they have the rainy season versus Rwanda or Burundi, which is a totally different, things that they have to think about based off of the climate, where they are in the world. And learning about processing and like sensory evaluation in that way has helped me to, especially getting my cue. I will say until the end of time that getting my cue really challenged me. And I think for a lot of people, it challenges you to remove your bias, internal or external, or even your bias for, I have a coffee program and I know what coffees that needs. The cue taught me a lot about coffee has value no matter what my personal preference or my customer's preference is. And I should be able to account for that and name what that is, despite whatever bias I might have against whatever it is. I always like to joke that for me, Kenyans, I smell them on the table and I immediately have like a thought, but that doesn't mean a Kenyan isn't an 88 or 90 coffee. It's just that I have an association, a lot of it since memory, with that coffee. So yes, being on green and tasting and cupping all the time has taught me so much about that part.
Totally. And for me, wild because I love Kenyans. Like
Yeah.
I know I'm cut from the George Howe cloth. Like I get it, but
Yes.
for me, it's East Asian coffees were really challenging for me to learn how to evaluate because that wasn't in my like coffee lineage. So I hadn't had a lot of exposure to them. So learning how to cup those outside of my preference was like really eye-opening.
Oh, can we pause on that? Because that gives me another thought. Speaking of East Asian coffees, Canafora or Robusta coffee, being on sensory evaluation and learning about coffee processing and how that is the coffee that a lot of coffee produce, not a lot, but like the bigger boys, right? Vietnam, Brazil, certain places, Canafora is what they can produce. And that doesn't mean that coffee doesn't have value. And a lot of people are spending a lot of time and effort into doing specialty Robusta or specialty Canafora, and it's amazing, right? I think that, learning about processing and about like sensory evaluation of coffees outside of what we prefer or we like helps you to see a bigger picture and give value to everything. Yeah, I'm a big Canafora advocate.
Yeah, it's really cool to see those changes in real time. So taking like a step back and like outside of yourself, because I know again we all have such like a unique path, like even thinking about who I know on this call, like Debbie came from yoga, right? Like I went to art school, you were in theater, Ivana worked for a multinational oil corporation or like something, like we all have a past. And so like what are like nuggets or like pieces that people can put in their toolbox to consider, or things that are good or bad like what are the things to think about?
Access, right? And I think that this is coming from, I'm a Black Muslim woman from the South, right? Before I left Atlanta, when I was still working in theater, I tried to work in coffee, and no one would hire me. And coming back to Atlanta almost 10 years later, and it's much more diverse, and you can see people, I think this is what fourth wave coffee is people putting their own cultural stamp or their own care and intentions on coffee. I see a lot more of that in Atlanta than I did a decade, or at this point, it's like 15 years ago, almost 20 years. Anyhow, aging myself. But yeah, it's like, that's something to consider. I think things are a lot better now, but also being on the green side of things, I know that there are fewer people of marginalized identities in positions of power. Like, even though Engaji Pace existed for the few years that it did, I'm one of maybe five, if five, Black women in green coffee sales in the US. Um, and the numbers for getting your Q grader certification, we were like something like 3% of total Q graders out of 16,000 people. So I think that things like that are something to consider, but not to hinder you. Because for me, a lot of my advancement or trying to get professionally certified was putting myself in positions where people would see me. And a lot of that meant like volunteering or getting involved with comps, which is an amazing thing to do regardless of like things like that. Like that has been the total like upliftment of me as a person and as a coffee professional, being involved with coffee competitions here. But a lot of coffee, unfortunately, does tend to be being in the right place at the right time and who you know. And I think that it can be unfortunate in some instances, but it can also be a great thing, right? Because coffee is about relationships, start to finish, relationships with producers, relationships with your customers, however you want to look at it. And so for me, a lot of it is being prepared for opportunities, sometimes volunteering, looking for sponsorship or fellowships or giveaways. Take all the free stuff you can get, because that's how you get your foot in a lot of doors. And for me, applying to Glitter Cap Barista the first time was me asking someone to take a chance on me, right? And from there, I got a lot of opportunity. And while that organization unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, I think there's a lot of things like Raise the Bar who are giving people similar opportunities to put you in front of like-minded people, to put you in front of people who are decision makers in certain instances. And that's really like outside of the other big thing, which is the financials, right? Your Q certification is like $2,500, depending on the instructor, depending on where it's given. And so if finances are a hindrance, then I would say if saving up isn't in your like, we're realistic, right? Who has savings right now? At least expendable savings like that. But if that's not in your wheelhouse, then what kind of position can I get at a company that can put me in the place where I can make that my ask, right? If I'm working as a trainer, if I'm working in QC, if I'm working in with baristas even, like I feel like having that as part of your professional ask, a lot of people, like for example, my company does a certain amount of allowance for education. I think people don't bargain enough or ask enough or barter enough when it comes to things like professional development, because that is something that could be part of your contract or your job wherever you are. For example, Perk, when we were competing, we were basically negotiating, okay, how much of this is going to be per diem? How much of this is going to be for travel? What part can I cover? What part do I need them to do? I think people often are afraid to ask for the things they need. But if you frame it or make the framework a benefit to the company and yourself, you're much more likely to get what you're looking for, what you're asking for.
Totally. Before we go to the next question, do you have any final like certification thoughts to close this piece?
I think that some people I know, when I was getting my Q, I heard a lot of people saying things like, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste, or you don't really need that to evaluate. You don't really need. I also have like the intro to post harvest processing from CQI. But for me, the benefits outweigh the naysayers or the doubts about it, because getting my Q like changed my life. And not in a it automatically opened up 80 billion doors and I got my dream job and I'm living on a farm. But like it opened up my mind as far as coffee evaluation. And that was a game changer for me doing my job better and showing up in spaces better. And especially as a judge, like having the ability to, like I said, remove bias and taste coffees for what they are. And not to say that you can't do that on your own. I think that there is a certain amount of self-motivation that you need in order to do that on your own, though. Does that, if that makes sense, right? You have to be an extremely motivated and like driven individual in order to make yourself cup every day, in order to make yourself do green evaluation when you don't have to, right? But something like the certification, it's not only like a goal marker, it's something you're working towards, but then at the end of the day you can say that I did this in order to get here, and now I have this to show for it. And it's validating in a lot of instances. Like sometimes imposter syndrome comes from for us all, I think, in certain situations. And then when someone's telling me they only taste one thing, for example, or they taste something in a coffee, I kind of have the, and this isn't to say that all tasting notes and all experiences aren't valid. That's very true. But it's when someone's telling me something negative about a coffee, um, having that under my belt allows me to remove what is that person's bias potentially and look at it for what it is. And trust that I am world calibrated and world certified. And so I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Totally. And I had like a little bit like opposite experience in that I was in coffee for 15 years before I got my Q because I had my dream job doing QC for George, and it wasn't. I come from a COE family, right? Like, and so it wasn't until I worked for a company that had deep pockets that I could advocate to get them to pay for this piece of paper that looked good to their board, that looked good, you know, that was something that I hadn't chased. But when I got laid off from that company and then had to consult, it was a real nice piece of paper to have on my LinkedIn, you know, like, and COE is Cup of Excellence. Thank you for that question. Sorry for the insider baseball. It's a slightly different evaluation style. And so it, but I think that your experience with the Q is like a more common, you know, like one, and definitely like the place in which people get to learn those things. Cool. So thinking about like the frame of this question is like, what secret skills did you have that you didn't know that you had that activated, you know, when you started cupping? Like you talked about intentionally palate development, intentionally working on your palate development. So it's like you already clearly had a push to work towards these things. But it was there like things that you did as a barista that you wouldn't even thought about or that were really handy 10 years later, or something that you didn't expect, didn't know about, or had seen and be like, oh, that won't be that hard, that like laid you out? Like what are
I think for me, a thing that I was good at that I didn't realize I was good at until I started cupping every day was I'm really good at one of these things is not like the other. So, and the only time I'm not is when I'm in my head about it. But triangulations are really easy for me, or when you have like 3 cups and you're like, which one of this is different, which is good when you're evaluating different lots of the same coffee or things like that. But also defects or taints in coffee. I can easily tell if something's gone off, even in like maybe this one, the water wasn't as full. I can taste that in the cup. And so I was really good at that. Something that was tricky for me um, was hearing other people talk about a coffee in a way that I didn't think was fair. that was that was very hard for me. And some part of it is like a bias, maybe, but I think part of it is when you work for bigger companies, cupping can look different depend on how do you handle that situation.
Yeah,
Okay.
a similar, I want to add in, because if people maybe haven't been in that situation or haven't experienced that firsthand, you can, like scrub the names, censored, whatever, but give an example. And then also, yeah, how did you navigate that?
So a good example is if we had coffees come in and we're doing arrival cupping. And so you might have 8 or 10 coffees from the same origin, or even maybe a table of different coffees.
And real quick,
Yes.
can you explain what you mean when coffees come in and what is the purpose of an arrival cupping to set
Yes.
the table?
Okay. So typically at working in QC or at an importer, you will get several samples of the same coffee throughout the season. One of them typically is the PSS or the pre-shipment sample. This is the green coffee that they are sending you to say, this is what you're going to get when this coffee has landed. You say, great, this is awesome, approved. They ship the coffee. Then once the coffee has landed at the port and is taken to the warehouse will send you the arrival sample or the ARR. This is to say, you cup this should taste like or within the range of, and I think a lot of people miss this part, it should taste like or within the range of the PSS. So it doesn't have to taste exactly the same. There is an allowable range that coffee can taste in, so long as the scores are similar and it meets the same need, the range, right? So if we're cupping, the coffees have come to port, the warehouse has sent us the arrivals that have come in. We are cupping a table. It could be all from one origin, it could be multiple origins. And for me, what I meant by when people are being unfair is when we're cupping the coffees, and I'm very big on filling out the entire sheet. I think that a lot of people don't cup with forms or with sheets, but for me, a way to check your bias is to write down what is happening as you're tasting the coffee. You don't have to do it on a form. You can take notes in your phone, whatever works for you. But I think that that's a way to check your own or keep yourself in line, self check your bias, right? And so if you're, say you've got this table of 10 coffees and people are just coming in slurping, right? They're going through the cups, slurping. And then you get to the part at the end where everyone has taken, the coffee is cooled, everyone's gotten all their sips, we're ready to discuss. And someone says something about a coffee. To me, if I didn't see you write anything down, I saw you take maybe 1 or 2 sips. You didn't even wait for it to cool. You came in late, so you got it. You didn't even get it when it was hot. Like, there's so many ways that you didn't give that coffee a fair chance or a fair evaluation, right? And so for me, I think that someone asked this question, a similar question when we did the intro to cupping for World Coffee about cupping with their company and having a hard time introducing them to or getting them to give different processes a fair chance, right? Maybe they're not a fan of naturals. Maybe they don't like carbonic maceration or they're biased towards them. And so they're not giving them the same like full evaluation or opportunity as a fully washed coffee or whatever it is that they personally prefer. And so for me, a big way to do that or to challenge that, right, is to cut blind. And sometimes you're not the decision making person or you're not like in a position to tell them about themselves, so to speak. But I think doing it in a way that is knowledge based and fact based helps you to make your point. So, for example, if you cut blind, this is table of Guatemala, Mexico, and Colombia, or Guatemala, Mexico, you got Kenya at the end, but all the coffees are blind, then the person has to evaluate the coffee without the preconceived notion of what it is on the paper, right? Um, and that's a way to do that and still be professional about it. There's also, depending on your relationship, having the conversation of what is the word? Your market, right? Are you catering to your customers, or are you catering to your preferences? Are you paying attention to, and you don't have to be like what's trendy, but are you paying attention to the wants and needs of your customer base? And are they open to other things outside of what you've been giving them? And then are you open to utilizing that opportunity to introduce them to something new? But yeah, usually I try to do it or counter it in as professional a way as I can. I like to let my receipts and the facts speak for me. So if I find that I feel like someone's being unfair, then if I can go back and look at how they cut this coffee next to something else, like if I have access to that data, then I'll bring that forward and be like, hey, last time you graded this coffee has not changed from the PSS to the arrival, for example. The coffee hasn't changed that much. Look at your notes. And this is why I like to have notes, right? If your notes say this, does this note match this score? But yeah, that's what I try to do.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it can be really tricky navigating disagreements around the cupping table, or like how you value things without like I firmly believe no cupper is the best cupper, the group is the best cupper. And I also firmly believe and know from lived experience, just because you're a buyer doesn't mean you're an excellent cupper. It means that you know your market that you're purchasing for, exactly. And that could be, that's what your job is. That's great. But also there can be some differences in opinions. Yes. So I know we've talked, this has been sprinkled in, but what would you tell baby Shaa'ista? What would you tell people now? Like, what are the things that you think are really important from your perspective to know as you move through this industry, especially in a sensory and green world?
Yeah. Find like-minded people. If you're wanting to grow or develop a certain skill, find other people who are trying to do that same thing. A lot of that can be at coffee events, or even, let me back it up. Let's go out a little bit. Try coffee that's not yours. Taste coffee that you didn't make, that isn't your shop's, that isn't the roaster that's your favorite. A lot of getting outside of your comfort zone is what's going to lead to like expansion and growth. I promise. Like, me challenging myself through sensory development led me to a lot of like applying a glitter cat, which a coworker told me about and was like, you should do this thing. And I was like, all right, I'll do a thing. Being open to opportunities and things outside of your comfort zone or what you know is where you will get that advancement that you're searching for, or lead you to the next thing. I don't think I know anyone, and maybe Rachel, you have a different perspective, who got very far or very high up in coffee by maintaining the same place or space or experience. It takes, or I've seen it takes a lot of like community effort and introducing yourself to people at different shops, or going to throwdowns, even if you don't like throwdowns, or yeah.
I think for everyone who isn't like a heteronormative cis white man, like I think that
Okay, there we go. Yes.
like I've seen a lot of people fail forward, like I've seen a lot of people not talk to anybody that doesn't look like them or go outside of their comfort zone and like have a great success in career in the last 20
Yeah.
years. But I think in the circles that I prefer to run in, your experiences is absolutely the shared
Yeah.
experience.
That's the caveat on that. Other minorities, marginalized peoples, um, femme, queer, BIPOC people, a lot of what is growth for us tends to be putting yourself out there and talking to the person at the shop across town and seeing what they're getting into. Get involved with USCC, United States Coffee Championships. There are so many opportunities to meet people and challenge yourself, but also to see what else is out there, especially if you're interested in the green side of coffee. That is where you're going to have those paths cross more than anywhere else. Everyone can't afford to go to World of Coffee or Expo every year. Everyone's job isn't fluing them out. So I think that competitions, especially volunteering when you have things local to you, is a way to meet people and put yourself in front of an opportunity if it's going to exist. Also, cup every day. I say this because
Always be cupping.
always be cupping. It just, and not just your coffee, like I said, buy a coffee from someone else, have your friends send you some coffee. Cupping is the baseline for sensory and palate development for our industry. It's how people come up with brew recipes. It's how people come up with roast profiles. It's how competitors choose which coffee they're going to compete with. It's just a baseline way for you to have access to multiple streams of knowledge within coffee and keep yourself not up to date, but like keep your palate working, right?
It's like going to the gym.
Yeah, you gotta keep that muscle moving. And that it doesn't have to be a full 5 cups, right? Like I said, you don't have to use forms, but definitely if you do 1 cup, write down your notes. Make sure you're tasting hot, warm to cool because coffee changes. And I think a lot of times we don't give it the opportunity to do that. And it shows you so much more about it when you let it do its thing.
Okay. I think, oops. I flipped back to our big one. There we go.
Oh, wait, one more thing. Cautionary tale.
Yeah, get in there.
Always negotiate your pay. Always negotiate your wage.
Say more about that.
Because most shops have a base, but most shops have a range. And you need to be able to show why you deserve whatever end of the range you're asking for, but also more than likely they are willing to listen, at least in my experience, right? If you can, like I said, provide the receipts. This is why I know the range is this. This is why I'm asking for this, and this is what I'm going to bring to you. Always like hype yourself up and talk about what you bring to the table, but negotiating your pay because everyone has a range. They might post one thing, but they have a range, they have a max, they have a cap, and you need to, for every position, even within the same company, renegotiate your wage. Especially if you're investing in yourself and your skills, your palate development, or your latte art, or whatever that is. The more you're invested into the company, you should be compensated as such. Yeah.
Absolutely. This is the first time I'm assigning homework ever. But there is like a 30 to 40-second video I just dropped in the chat that I'm going to need everyone to watch after this. It's my favorite video on the internet, and it's a Sprudge edit of a George Howell panel where he talks about tasting coffee from hot to cold. And I'll just let you take it from there later. But before we leave, was there something that you had been thinking about we might ask, or is there anything else that you want to share before we move on to what are you up to right now?
I always say the reason I got into management is because a lot of baristas leave coffee before they get to the really good parts. And part of that is poor management or mismanagement or not having a great experience with leadership. And so I always wanted to provide people with that experience. And so I always like to tell people who are trying to get to the next thing or figure out what the next thing is, don't let someone discourage you from continuing to try because you're having a poor experience with leadership or management or whatever the case might be. The best parts are past that person. Like the best parts are after that thing. And as someone who definitely in several careers, right, hit the, okay, I can't go any further with this, what's next? Coffee is the first thing that I've done, the first career where I'm learning literally every day. And I never wonder what's next because I'm constantly challenged. I'm constantly, it's beautiful in that way that every day is different. And I'm always being challenged and learning something new and never feel stagnant, which is a huge thing for me. I just, as a person, I can't stand like being stagnant or not developing, and coffee has enabled me to do that. So if you're ever in a situation or you feel like I can't go anywhere here, the next thing, like just work towards the next thing. Don't let poor leadership or management stop you from getting to the good parts.
I think there's I'll have to look for this and maybe we can send it in a follow-up, but I wrote a Roast Magazine article that was about that and interviewed you for it. And I think it was a really conversation. Yeah. I hope it's one of their ones they posted for free. I'm not sure. I think I asked them to because I was like, you can't put an article about access behind a paywall. Sorry. Okay, well, what are you we know about Rebel Cupping Room. Is there anything else that you have that you would like to plug real quick before we get out of here?
Rebel Cupping Room will be posting more cuppings coming up in the San Diego, SoCal area. We are mobile, and I'm actually been talking to a couple of East Coast baristas about doing kind of like a non-Q prep course, and coming to them and doing that. So if people are interested in that, I just need 6+ people. If you're interested in that. And everything I do is sliding scale for the most part. So the whole ethos behind Rebel is for it to be accessible to baristas and people trying to develop their skills, as someone who needed to have that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for generosity and resources of other people. So that's definitely something I want to share as well. And I'm getting married in 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are. Married party.
Yes. And hopefully you'll see me if you come to Level Up in the fall again. Thank you.
Heck yeah. Okay. Well, we want to say thank you so much. I did some quick Googling and I did find that article.
Yay.
So I dropped it in the chat. It is free for reading. And it talks literally exactly about what Shaa'ista was just talking about. Thank you so much for your time and for really being integral to this month's theme. and bringing so much of your knowledge to our community.
Yay! Thank you,
Thank
Rachel.
you.
Thanks y'all for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.